I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this Word in Your Ear podcast, videocast, thing for which there is no name. Mark Ellen and I have been creating in this line since 2007. And if any of it has met with your approval, then please click to subscribe because it helps. Leave a comment because we like to hear from you, and maybe even consider becoming a Patreon supporter because then, well, you'll be one of us. Visit patreon.com/wordinyour-ear for details.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So, have you heard the news? Not that there's good rocking tonight, Mark, but further to the good rocking tonight is Bruce Springsteen is putting out the lost albums, which is, get ready, 7 never heard full-length albums put out.
7 records recorded, I think, between 1983 and 2018, is that right?
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, A, astonishing work rate, which you have to admire. B, if any section of these records have been particularly spectacular, wouldn't we not have maybe heard about them before? I don't know, would they not have surfaced? I mean, it's great. I love the idea of it, but it's just, we have to brace ourselves from being possibly underwhelming.
Well, I suppose if you're a hardcore Bruce Springsteen fan, you will not be underwhelmed at all. You're half-whelmed already. Actually, you're on the day of release, you will be fully overwhelmed. Straight. I mean, this is literally, if you're a certain kind of fan, this is 7 Christmases come simultaneously, isn't it?
Oh no! If you're a completist, it's wonderful.
Because actually, and it points out the kind of one of the interesting things. One of the most exciting things about the record business and everything that kind of goes with it, the whole fandom, is just going out and spending money. Isn't it? People love it. You know what I mean? They'll have ordered it already, and I don't know what it costs. It's no doubt a significant sum of money, and then the hardcore people won't care how much it costs. Actually, if you double the price, they're actually twice as happy. Because and it's kind of this
is worth it.
This is a realization on the part of people like Bruce Springsteen that it's just part of the fan service, isn't it? Would you like to just buy more stuff? Yes, I would. Yeah, fine.
And ropey old recordings used to be quite cheap, and now actually the more lo-fi, the more expensive. Fair enough. Lovely.
I mean, I don't actually think these will be madly lo-fi because these he claims are kind of completed records and have titles and so forth. And presumably, Bruce Springsteen, they have some kind of thematic unity to them, which tends to be the way that he does.
They do, but they're not finished. They're finished to the point where some of them started mixing and remixing, but they don't feel completely finished. And the thing about finishing albums is that so much of that process goes towards what you eventually get to listen to, isn't it? It's all that final bit of embroidery, the final bits of tweaking, the running orders.
I tell you what it also is.
Packaging.
I tell you what it also is, and we've talked about this in the past on podcasts, is also when the record, in the days of a record company, when they were going to press up a load of copies and they were going to put it out in the shops and they were going to back it with advertising, and it was a huge bet. They took out as much insurance as they possibly could. Generally, by saying, I'll tell you what, we don't hear a single. And then the band would go away and do a single. And Bruce Springsteen did this on his most successful album, Born in the USA. Dancing in the Dark was written and recorded because John Landau didn't hear a single. Whereas when you know something's going to be out there, it's armored for the commercial fray, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's done in a different way. It's serious. And whereas these records, he obviously he must have been not wildly excited by them. You can't help thinking that. Otherwise, he would have put them out.
Yeah, he himself surely would have pushed it, wouldn't he? And tried to finish it.
You would have thought so. Yeah, but, it'd be interesting that the kind of proof of the pudding.
Well, you come away just feeling so impressed with his productivity. It's first, the man must wake up every morning with a song in his head.
It's also
into a studio.
It's also going to demand a lot of the energy of hardcore fans, isn't it? Because they're suddenly going to have what no bunch of hardcore fans have ever had in the history of the world, which is 7 albums on one day. Yeah. It's never happened before. What are they going to do?
They'll be ringing each other. I'm on album 6, track 7. There's a guitar solo about 30 seconds in, which is just brilliant.
Yeah, and is it going to take people a while to? People are going to take a week of work, aren't they? And just going to sit there and listen to them. It's a completely novel kind of listening experience. But I do tend to agree with your point that if albums have got anything really commercially striking on them, they tend to come out. We've seen loads of cases in the last 20, 30 years of kind of, people putting out their lost albums or the albums that never came out or whatever. And they've generally been of interest to what you might call scholars.
Smile album by the Beach Boys.
Absolutely. I can't help thinking, we are better off with the legend of the Smile album than anybody trying to recover.
Yeah, because whatever you hear is going to be, by definition, it's going to be slightly disappointing, isn't it? There was the same. Jimi Hendrix had a record that he'd almost finished when he died, and that came out in some version. Amy Winehouse, I think her 3rd album came out, didn't it? Jeff Buckley had done My Sweetheart the Drunk, was kind of, I don't know. I don't know how much that was finished, but it was eventually put out as sketches. Wasn't it sketches from my? Yeah. I mean, those things they're all right, but they're always going to be. It's wonderful to have them. You're flicking through somebody's notebook, but it's not quite.
It's great. It's great to hear them once. Maybe even twice, but I don't know.
Rare case. Blind Willie McTennell by Bob Dylan. I know I always say that, but which is that was a kind of demo. It's just that you can hear the sound of the metronome clicking away on the piano. It's him playing piano. It's Martin Knopfler playing the guitar. But it's an absolutely staggering performance. And maybe the thrill of it is that it wasn't finished in that case. Maybe the thrill it is just so raw, and it's just like there are only 2 versions of it, I think, in existence anywhere, apart from odd things he did live. It's thrilling, but maybe that wouldn't have been as good if it had been embellished, a bit like John Wesley Harding. Maybe the fact that it was so spare made it so attractive.
Yes, that's a good point. Good point. But anyway, will this join Schubert's Unfinished Symphony? Which is he never got around to the 3rd movement. He kind of thought, let's leave it as it is.
I've just, do you know what? My work is done.
It's a demo. It's
a demo.
It's
I'm
a
bootleg.
bootleg.
Watch the telly. I'm going to go to the pub.
And then there's Charles Dickens died before he could complete. What's it called? The Mystery of
Edwin Drood,
which is never to be solved. And, so there are those things. And there's also
Philip K. Dick had the Owl in Daylight, I think. That's a book.
Oh, really?
And there's a Stephen King book, I think, called The House on Value Street, which I don't think ever surfaced. And there were various Salinger books, which they were threatening to put out. I don't think they ever did.
There's Hemingway books that came out after he died. And what
was the sequel to Kill a Mockingbird? Or was it the sequel? I mean...
Well, I don't know. I don't know much about it, really. But, yeah, there was...
Go Set a Watchman, the Harper Lee book, which it came out eventually. I think it was written in 1960 and came out in 2015 or whatever. And then was generally thought to be the first draft of To Kill a Mockingbird. So the whole thing became very, very convoluted. And also there was the general feeling that people weren't 100% sure that she'd written To Kill a Mockingbird on her own in the first place anyway and hadn't been helped by Truman Capote. So very, very odd.
So it's all going to change further with the advent of digital technology, because I was reading the other day that Ed Sheeran, from nowadays, whenever he goes in a studio, there is a camera running. And he's doing this to kind of protect himself against mischievous, meritless cases of alleged plagiarism, so that he'll be able to go back and say, on the Tuesday the 24th, this is what I did and this is how I wrote it, and you can see me doing it. Which seems it's very sad that anybody has to do that.
Well,
but I can kind of understand that he does it. But what that's going to mean, presumably, is that many years in the future, all that footage will all kind of appear in some shape or form, won't it? You know, footage of any kind just has a habit of finding its way to the public
You'll be
domain.
watching day 6 of his remixing session. Will be released. I'm still not 100% convinced I understand how that protects him against any accusations of song theft, because you're looking at him just bolting together the components of a song and not where he got those songs from. But the fact that he's doing it kind of makes sense. And yeah, everyone realizes the commercial value and everything. I remember you and I doing Old Grey Whistle Test years ago and Bauhaus coming on. Do you remember Bauhaus?
Yeah,
Pete Murphy?
Yeah.
I remember them coming into the dressing room with a camera behind them.
God, they
with
did.
A camera. Do you remember that? And he wandered in, and there was the band, and we went, "Oh, what's going on?" And so we're just shooting this for a video or something like that. And every part of that day was recorded. Them rehearsing and setting up and sound checking and hanging around in the dressing room beforehand and afterwards and talking to us and stuff. I've never seen it. I remember thinking at the time, what an extraordinary thing. Why would anybody want to see this? It now makes absolute sense, actually.
So after we've done this, what I'm going to do, Mark, is I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to look up Bauhaus Whistle Test 1980, whenever it was, and I will find a bit of footage of you in the dressing room.
It could well be there.
Will be there. So, I think Bauhaus, let's be fair, they were ahead of the curve.
You're listening to Word in Your Ear. Cheaper than therapy, and you can walk the dog at the same time.
We meant to talk about this last week. We didn't get around to it, but it can't go unmarked. The fact that it's 20 years since the US version of The Office launched on March 26th, 2005. And I've always been rather devoted to the American Office. I know, generally speaking, we rather look down on American efforts to kind of adapt our comedy favourites, and there have been many attempts over the years.
Very few of them really worked, did they, in the last 30 years? They tried Spaced, and that didn't work. They tried The Vicar of Dibley, This Country, Taskmaster. I think they all failed. So I think Steve Merchant and Ricky Gervais were kind of really glad they'd been signed up, but didn't have enormous expectations it was going to work. But it did. It's been a huge, huge success, hasn't it?
Well, it was such a success, particularly in American terms, because, in British terms, what do you want to achieve with a sitcom, a Fawlty Towers or The Office or whatever? You want to be taken to the nation's bosom, don't you? You want to win a bunch of awards. You want to launch a load of careers, and then you want to do about 12 episodes maximum, what I mean? That's your lot. And then they're always treasured memories, aren't they? Because they're all kind of perfect. Whereas American sitcoms, totally different. The definition of a successful American sitcom is you've done 500 episodes.
Yeah, you just run forever.
You just run forever. You become, because they are the kind of tent poles of what used to be American network television, didn't they? It was certain nights were Friends or Frasier or Cheers or whatever the big ones were. Seinfeld, and they ran forever, and they do thousands of pilot seasons, most of which are never taken up, never go anywhere at all. It's a completely different attitude, and I think the fear, not just amongst British fans, but also amongst kind of American actors and comedy fans, people who followed the British Office, was that the feeling was that Americans were bound to ruin it. They were bound to put a laugh track on it or incidental music or whatever. The actors were bound to be far too good looking. It was all bound to be far too cheerful.
English too. Everyone thought they wouldn't understand the Englishness of the idea of the pub quiz and things like that. All the kind of in jokes, but they just found their way into it, didn't they?
Well, it took them a while, apparently. I think the first series or so, there was no guarantee it was going to continue the way it did. But then it sort of took off, and it got a life entirely of its own, it seems to me. And I became absolutely fascinated. Of course, it's got an afterlife, like so many comedies have nowadays, thanks to YouTube, which is this stuff just lives forever in bits, re-edited, fan versions of it. People who put together little compilation tapes of 10 bits where Dwight went crazy, or, my 20 favorite bizarre things that Steve Carrell did. But I did think it was really educational in the kind of, in terms of the difference of American TV to British TV, because they considered the cast that they brought in were kind of markedly less glamorous than ordinarily would be the case for an American sitcom.
But they are infinitely more glamorous than the British version. They just are. They're just really presentable human beings, which makes it quite different, really.
Yeah, this is it. And you see this, most clearly with, the central romance there, don't you?
Yes.
Which is in UK was Dawn and Tim, and in the United States is Jim and Pam. And they're both, they're trying to look ordinary, but they both look spectacularly good looking.
They are good
sort of people, if they walked into a British pub, darts would stop on the way to the dartboard, wouldn't they? People would stop pulling pints. Oh my God, that's a strikingly good-looking person who's just come in. Yeah. Oh, that's just your standard American actor with perfect teeth,
playing a dowdy part. Actually,
yeah, they're dressing down to playing a harassed mum in a TV commercial or whatever. Not like British actors.
No,
at
and
all.
It's not quite as convincing because one of the main drivers of the English one is the idea that we've all worked in offices at some stage, and therefore we understand the dynamic of an office, don't we? You understand that everybody finds their position. It's like a class at school, got the rebel and the bore and the joker, and you know what I mean? You just identify all those kind of people. But I think the main difference there is that in the British one, you kind of feel that you're entering the thing via the character of Tim, who's the normal person, and around him really are all these very, very odd, eccentric people, a particularly eccentric one being David Brent. But the American one, you feel that they're actually quite normal people. As you say, they're quite presentable, aren't they? And they're quite normal, and you're just in a big audience watching this one narcissistic, self-loving, attention-grabbing lunatic, the Steve Carrell character, trying to get your attention.
Steve Carrell is an extraordinary talent, no doubt about it. I watch him in absolutely anything because he's just remarkable. But I think it was Ricky Gervais that pointed out the importance of casting him, because he said he's almost good looking.
Yes, almost.
And he is,
Yeah.
It kind of looks like a cartoon in some ways.
Yes.
It looks like an illustration from a DC comic from 1972 or something.
Yeah.
Somebody working in the same office as Superman. But he's just got that extraordinary watchability, that kind of what is he going to do next? And the camera just gets in very close on him. And I've rarely seen an actor who can put so many levels of desperation into their eyes. You know what I mean? That you can see him looking trapped when he's done something wrong, and he's trying to play it one way to the people in the office and then a slightly different way to you as the viewer at home watching through the faux documentary camera. It's extraordinary how that whole technique, do you remember when you first saw The Office, the UK Office? I'm pretty sure. So what year was it, Mark, the UK Office?
I can't remember. Was it late 90s? I think
it must have been. It must have been. And I can remember the first time I caught it on BBC 4 or 3 or whatever. And those were still in the days when you just turned on the telly to see what was on. Imagine those days. And I turned it on, and there was this, I was watching a documentary, what appeared to be a documentary about a strange office. And it took me a few minutes to go, oh, hang on, this is a comedy. This is a comedy. Whereas nowadays, you're so used to this kind of thing. It couldn't be anything but, could it?
Yeah.
You never get those old fly on. You don't get genuine fly on the wall documentaries anymore, do you? You just get fake fly on the wall documentaries turned into comedies
with handheld cameras, with wobbly cameras.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, all based on Spinal Tap, really. But it did strike me watching both of them that the they've got two strands, haven't they? The Office. One is the David Brent character. What's he only going to do now? The Michael Scott character, and the other is the love affair. And the love affair is incredibly important. The love affair in the English version, the British version, is just the Dawn and Tim Lover is really moving, I think. I don't know if you remember the very end when they kind of get together and it's the Christmas party and he's the secret Santa, isn't it? And he's picked her as the person to give the gift to. And he gives her the set of paints with a little note about keep going, you know, I believe in you or whatever it is. And she's leaving the firm and she's leaving the country to go off and to the airport and I think live abroad with her boyfriend. And then she opens the package and she reads the note and turns the taxi around and comes back to the party. And even then it's so tense because what could have happened? He might have just thought, oh, well, I'll go off and I'll be dancing with somebody else or talking to somebody. And she arrives and when they look at each other across that room and she's come back, that is a fantastic bit of television. And it's the same with the American version, isn't it? All the way through.
Jim and Pam. But you see, there's the problem. You've got to have romantic tension for these things to work.
Yeah.
But the problem is, as soon as you break the tension, it's never quite the same anymore.
No, absolutely.
So Jim and Pam eventually get together, and everybody's happy, but it's never quite the same again afterwards. Frasier,
Niles and Daphne, which seemed unbelievably hard to take on board in the first place.
But once you did, but once they got together, it's like game over, you know.
Yeah.
You can't do that. There was a couple in, I'm trying to remember the names, it's years since I saw it, The West Wing. Is it the Deputy Chief of Staff and his his PA, Josh, yes, and his PA who just adores him but doesn't tell him.
Yeah, she's the head of the.
It's a completely one-sided thing.
Coalition, I think, isn't she? That's
well, I don't know. I think she just works for him in the office, and she is just absolutely obsessed with him, and that's the thing that just it clearly kept loads of people watching The West Wing for years when they weren't particularly bothered about the main plot. It was just like tuning in to, is this romance, is this fire still burning?
Have they got it together yet?
But once you've got them together, there's nowhere to go.
There was one incredible one in The Good Life. Do you remember that? The Good Life, where you've got Tom and Barbara, and you got Margot and Jerry living next door, and there was this fantastic flirtation between
two-way flirtation, wasn't there?
And Margot, was that?
Well, I mean, Jerry and Felicity Kendall were all Jerry and I'm getting the names mixed up.
Yeah.
Jerry and Barbara were always flirtatious,
and really
then Margot
amazing.
and Tom were flirtatious.
Yeah, and there are moments when you think they're almost going to snog. You know, they're sitting there drunk on kind of cooking sherry, sitting on the sofa, virtually with their arms around each other, telling each other how much they fancy each other. You think this is, of course, it's completely innocuous and it doesn't lead anywhere, but it just adds another extraordinary dimension to the whole character of the play.
It's the secret of comedy, romance.
You're tuned to Word in Your Ear, the longest continuous conversation in rock and roll.
Any other business, we're joined by Alex Gold. Hello, Alex.
Hello.
Alex, I want to know, will you be protesting about the fact that Westminster Council are finally doing something about something I've been whinging about for absolutely ages? Over-amplified buskers in the West End of London, driving people mad by playing whatever it is repeatedly. And, there's been various representations made by office workers just driven mad by just hearing the same tune again and again. Whereas you consider this as valid artistic expression, Alex, don't you?
Well,
no, you don't.
Well, I've said that, but I have to admit that every single time I walk through Trafalgar Square and hear another version of Hallelujah played wrong, a little part of me dies a little.
Oh, God.
So I'm kind of on board with it.
I still love it, but it is being branded as noise pollution now, isn't it?
Well, there's a certain level of decibels, I think, that it tends to hit, which it does become a sort of encroachment in your personal piece.
But you see, is it not a fact? And I ask you this as a working musician, that musicians always always want to constantly tweak it louder. Because if they appear to be competing with anything, whether it's traffic noise or the public talking, the way they respond is they just play louder. They just do, Alex.
I think the big mistake a lot of musicians make is, louder means more attention. It's all about them. Whereas, the trick to a successful performance that works for everyone is it's not about you. It's about the people you're projecting to. And there's this kind of perceived notion that making yourself louder and thus, forcing your people's attention, will make it somehow better, and it doesn't quite work like that in reality.
Well, I'd be very interested to see you stand that argument up at the next meeting of the musicians.
Yeah, good luck with that one.
Although I entirely agree.
Yeah.
So, what else have we been doing? What have we been doing this week? What's going to be?
We did a gig in Wareham, didn't we?
We did
David
a gig.
Had the most extraordinary experience. We were driving to do this show, the one-man show. David Hepworth, Mark Allen in Wareham. And we just outside of Wareham, we passed on the side of the road a tree with a giant poster with our two faces. It's one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in my life.
It's a forest.
Oh my God!
Forest, one tree with a poster of him and
with
me.
a picture of us two saying Friday night.
We looked like it was a wanted man. It was this kind of thing that would appear in the Adventures of Robin Hood. Whatever.
Yeah.
The police are seeking these two men.
Bullet holes on our forehead. That's right.
With their inquiries.
Well, we had a lot of fun. It was really
had a lot of fun.
Lots of people came. A fantastic bunch of people.
Yeah,
Teddy Bear's Picnic and Hole in the Ground and Wheelie Festival and Live Aid and Bob Dylan and Chrissy Hind and all sorts of stuff. It was good, wasn't it, Dave?
We had great fun. What else have we been doing? Who else have we recorded?
We've got the
Alex?
Kate Mossman podcast is up. I think the Ed Tudor one's up. I think Russell Mail should be up by the time you get to hear this podcast. The Russell Mail of Sparks, who we've done. And we finished with our birthday guest. May we present Stephen Lambe.
And now it's time for Word in Your Ears Birthday Guest of the Week.
And we're joined by a birthday guest, Stephen Lambe. Stephen, you've got a question, but you've also got a Stack Waddy quiz.
Very exciting.
Try it out. This is excellent.
Yeah, it's an old school Stack Waddy as well.
All right.
Thank God.
So it's
old school.
It's one of the ones it's in the style of the ones you were doing.
All right.
When you first started them. So we lost, as you well publicised, we lost Bob Newhart last year. The brilliant.
All right, of course, yes.
And it occurred to me that there was some sort of correlation between some of his skit the right word? His monologue titles and song titles by Canterbury Proggers Caravan.
Oh, I know. I can hear where you're going here.
You may know some of these. So
go on. So we're going to guess which ones are Bob Newhart, which ones are
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So there's five.
Okay.
Five.
Right.
So it won't trouble you very long.
All right. Go on.
So the first one is the dog. He's at it again.
Oh my goodness. I don't know though.
That must be Bob Newhart.
No. Well, I would say, go on. All right. I was going to say Bob Newhart.
It's Caravan.
Yeah, I was going to say it's Caravan.
No,
it's
too British, that is. Yes,
it is a little bit.
Too English.
If you remember, Caravan also have their album titles can be quite playful.
Yes, cunning stunts, didn't they? Is that right?
This one's for this one's from for girls who grow plump in the night.
Right, of course.
So the second one is a friend and a dog, staying on the dog thing.
We're now inclined to think it's Bob Newhart because we've had the Caravan version of the dog.
Is that Bob Newhart?
Yeah, it's Bob Newhart.
All right, okay.
Yeah. So these are lesser known Bob.
Right, go on.
So number 3 is the unauthorized breakfast item.
Wow. Oh my goodness. This is good.
It is good.
That's got to be Caravan.
It is Caravan. Yeah, it is. And it's about it's about them stealing a croissant in a Marriott hotel when they were playing a gig in the USA. And actually, the album's called that as well.
It makes me think I ought to investigate Caravan. I think I only know if I do it all over again.
Yes, and
that's latter day
girls and all that. I think wasn't it?
They're still actually, as an aside, they still play live and they're still really good.
Really.
So number 4 is Stuck in a Hole.
God.
Who's
I'm going to say
for this?
Caravan. I'm going to say
Yeah,
Caravan.
it is Caravan.
Caravan. Go on.
And the final one is Retirement Party.
Oh, well, that's Bob Newhart.
It's Bob Newhart.
You see, well, as soon as that's a really good one, actually, Stephen. That's all very good. And when you presented the idea, I thought, we're going to get the cruise of the USS Codfish coming up in a moment. Because that's the one that always sticks in my mind of Bob Newhart.
Yeah, and it's obviously everybody always knows things like the driving instructor.
Yeah, of course.
Stuff like that. But of course, like most people, he was putting out albums till the late 60s.
Yeah,
and some of those later ones from album 4 onwards are actually not very well known.
No.
Still very good, but not very well known. So.
Oh yeah, God bless Bob Newhart. He was fantastic.
That's brilliant, and it's rekindled my interest in Caravan. Yeah, they were very funny songs, weren't they? Really.
Yeah, I mean, the dog, he's at it again. They still play it because that's one of their better known songs. But the text doesn't really bear much analysis, really, because it hasn't worn very well. I think it's about Flasher.
Oh, yeah. Yes, everybody used to write songs about flashes.
Yeah, it was 1970s.
Different times.
The lone groover. Can't do that now. But Stephen, you got a question too, haven't you?
Yes, I wanted to talk about the kind of state of concert lighting as it is now. Because, and to ask the question, I mean, what is concert lighting for?
Now it's for spectacle, isn't it?
Yeah,
you could argue that what a show looks like is more important now than what it sounds like, because you kind of know what it's going to sound like. It's going to sound as close an approximation to the record that you've got already as possible. Otherwise, you might be disappointed. The important thing is what looks good on an Instagram that you're going to send to all your mates.
Yes, yeah. I think the problem. Well, concert lighting often looks really, really good, obviously. But now, in the days when we first started going to gigs, it was just kind of to light the stage, to light the band, really, wasn't it? And maybe to provide you with a bit of atmosphere. And you might get bands like Hawkwind or Nectar doing their sort of slide. And Genesis did sort of slideshows during The Lamb Lies Down. But now you've got, sorry, it's going to sound a bit grumpy, actually. Now you've got every possibility known to mankind, because of LED technology means you can have whatever light you want wherever you want it, but also people have often got huge LED screens behind the stage, and even small club venues can afford these things now. Really, which means they often look fantastic, but it also means that sometimes you can't see the band.
You see, I was going to say this because one interesting thing is, you say lighting was first devised to be able to see the band. And if you went to see a 60s package tour, there would be barely any lighting at all.
Yeah, true.
Then you got people like Pink Floyd and you got light shows. And one of the points of the light show was to distract from the band, oddly enough. You know, nobody has a visual image. If we have a visual image of Pink Floyd, good example, we see 4 dark figures at the front.
Or 4 silhouettes, then a huge circular screen.
Yeah.
With a kind of beating heart or a cash register.
And because hasn't it also been the anniversary, or talking about the anniversary of The Office, hasn't it also been the anniversary of Pink Floyd at Pompeii? I think it has.
Yeah, I think it has. That's right.
And Pink Floyd at Pompeii, my understanding is, because they did that thing in an empty amphitheater, didn't they?
It did.
Which is a very Pink Floyd idea. And the director of it said, are you going to bring that big gong along? You know, because they used to do a number, I think, on the previous album, that climax with somebody banging a huge, great gong. And they said, well, no, we're not going to play that song. And the director, you see, there's no TV director born who, once he learns that he could have a gong in the film, doesn't want a gong in the film. Yeah. It says,
I'm going to work without the gong.
I can't work without the gong. So they had to redo the show pretty much so that they could involve the gong. Sorry, I was getting off the point.
No, but actually, that's interesting, because there's an iconic shot of Roger Waters hitting that gong.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's it. You see, because oddly enough, Pink Floyd had all that stuff, because they themselves were not spectacular. They didn't move about. They didn't dance. They weren't like the Shadows. They weren't like Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band.
In fact,
there
part of
wasn't
the
a lot to
point
see.
of the wall was that the four of them weren't the real members of the Pink Floyd, weren't they? There were people pretending to be them, and then the real members of the Pink Floyd came through the wall.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've seen the film, and I remember going to see Rush in about 1981, I think, and of course they had the massive screens way above their heads. So again, it was a bit like the Pink Floyd thing. You might not be a huge amount to see with three blokes on stage, but you've got these huge screens as well.
Yeah.
But now, of course, people can have those screens for not a huge pile of cash in a small club venue, and rather than being way above the stage as they would have been in those sort of venues, they're now directly behind the band. Sometimes they can look spectacular, but sometimes you see the band in silhouette at best. Yeah. Of course, the lighting has to, because you don't want it lighting the screen. The lighting has to look away from.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Have to look away from it. So sometimes you don't see the band at all, right? Or
Have you been seeing Bob Dylan in the last 20 years?
No, I haven't.
Well, because basically
we know
his policy,
lighting man.
His policy has been to be invisible. You know what I mean?
Patrick
So he's just not lit at all. So the person
would you want to be enigmatic was the main thing, wasn't it? And enigmatic means virtually unseeable. Really, this lighting possible.
There is one other issue, and this is a slightly more serious issue, because it's if you have epilepsy, for instance, which a member of my family does,
right?
There was a time, you will again remember this, where you say strobing may be used in this performance, and you knew that strobing may be used, but it probably only be used for a few seconds. You could probably look away if you had epilepsy, and you'd at least be warned. Now you can do anything you want whenever you want, so you can flash lights, you can have strobing for at any time during the performance, at whatever intensity and whatever speed you want, which means that if you're someone with epilepsy, say, you don't know what you're going to get.
And do they know? They don't pre-warn you, I suppose. No, they don't.
Generally, no, because what happens will really be up to the lighting designer as much as anything.
Yes, whatever it feels like.
So we're always on tenterhooks, rather, if we go to a concert together, because we don't know what's going to happen, what the lighting is going to be like, and it makes for quite a difficult experience. Anyway, I think that the point is, you can do anything you want now, but it doesn't mean you necessarily should.
You necessarily should.
Yeah,
that's
very good point.
Listen, that's good advice that should apply to absolutely everything in entertainment. Just because you can doesn't mean it's a good idea. And of course, bands always think that bands are like golfers. They always think they're one piece of equipment away from perfection. Yeah. And they always think, so I've bought a new toy that is going to make it transcendent, and it's not necessarily the case. So we shall take that on board, along with your, and we shall return with all haste to the catalogue of Caravan and the great works of the late great Bob Newhart.
You should definitely do both.
Yeah.
Very good.
Happy birthday, Steve.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.